Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are tuning in today. Thank you so much for joining me for my next installment of Facebook Live, and I'm also doing this on YouTube. And I think it's coming through on both. Hard for me to tell, but there you have it. So welcome everyone. It's really a pleasure and an honor for me to be here with you all today, talking about some really important, at least important to me in my perspective on the Buddhist tradition, some really important concepts and teachings that come to the world through the Buddhist faith or tradition. And when I speak about concepts and teachings from Buddhism, I'm not preaching any type of religion or trying to convert anyone or anything like that. But that's the bulk of my training comes from the Buddhist tradition. So maybe I'll talk a little bit about myself before we get into the topic of the day. My name is Chris. For those of you who don't know me, I am a long-time mindfulness and meditation teacher and practitioner. Been practicing now for 40 years, been teaching since 2009. Deeply trained in the early schools of Buddhism, Theravada, here in Thailand and Burma. Also deeply trained in the Mahayana schools of Buddhism. That's really where I started, in Korean Zen, also Japanese Zen and Tibetan, mostly Dzogchen from the Tibetan school. And in addition to that, I'm also a certified clinical trauma professional with an emphasis on somatic psychotherapy. So I do a lot of body-based work, which fits right into, if you're familiar with the Buddhist traditions, mindfulness of the body. Very similar, and a lot of the practices actually overlap in that way. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm here doing these sessions live online, on YouTube, on Facebook, as a way of cultivating a certain type of momentum leading into an online program that I'm offering. And so this is the same in that way. I'm really here building that type of momentum into a year-long program that I'm offering entitled Impermanence, Emptiness and Liberation. And this program is specifically created for advanced meditators. And let me qualify that. So what I mean by advanced meditators is anybody who has sat a retreat in the past, or if you've been with me on any of the programs that I've led, either online or in person, that would qualify as well. So that's the prerequisite for this course. I'm getting a note that my YouTube connection is unstable, but anyway, I'm going to go ahead and proceed. So that's a little bit more about the course. If you want to find out all of the details and go ahead and register, you can go to my website, www.suchsweetthunder.org, and you can find out more about the program there. Just quickly, it runs from January 7th to December 19th, and registration is already open. And we meet a couple of days a week. We'll be meeting, I don't want to go too into the times because there are people from all over the world here, but twice a week. We meet once on the weekend, depending on where you're calling in from. It's either a Friday or a Saturday or a Sunday. And once during the week, either a Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday. Again, depending on what time zone you're in. Yeah. So Impermanence, Emptiness and Liberation is the name of the course. We'll be, taking a deep dive into teachings from, again, those two traditions, the early schools of Buddhism, the later schools of Buddhism. We'll also be looking at some texts, and that'll be a sort of a different feature in this upcoming program, where I tend to offer sort of a book study alongside the materials that I'll be offering. We'll be engaging in a book from Stephen Batchelor, one of my teachers. The book is called that's my book, A Verse from the Center. I wrote a book called A Voice from the Ever Change, and I'll talk about that maybe a little bit later. Verses from the Center is the name of the book that we'll be looking at from Stephen Batchelor. Likely we will be also exploring Bhikkhu Analio's book on mindfulness of breathing. And so in the course we do go through the mindfulness of breathing curriculum laid forth by Bhikkhu Analio, where we do the 16 steps of mindfulness of breathing. I'm not going to go into all of that now. If you want to find out more about those 16 steps, if you go to Google and put that in, I'm sure it comes up. So have fun with that. But for now, let's talk about impermanence and no-self. So I want to get into the topic today by way of telling a couple of different parables or little teaching stanzas, if you will, from the Buddhist tradition. And the first one is from the Udaya Sutta, and this is a quote from the Buddha. And the Buddha says, "In the seen, there's only the seen. In the heard, there's only the heard. In the sensed, there's only the sensed. In the cognized, there is only the cognized. This is how you should train yourself." And so the Buddha here is really making this invitation to us, right? To recognize first, to acknowledge, to recognize, to feel really how our mind goes into stories. Right? It's not very often that it's the scene, only the scene, right? It's that I see my cat and then, oh, I love my cat. She's so cute. She's the best cat in the world. I wonder if she needs a treat. Have I cleaned her litter box today? Right? And so we're off, right? So in the scene, just the scene, it's just seeing the cat and just noticing the color, right? The face. And then, there'll be some emotional responsiveness to that naturally, right? But this way of connecting to the present moment. Same with the heard. In the heard, only the heard, right? And so here we get a little bit more subtle, right? You can do this also with the scene, right? We tend to attach a label to what it is that we see and to what it is that we hear. Let's say I'm hearing a bird song. Right? In my mind, I'll label it bird song. And then I just go on to the next thing. But, have I ever really heard bird song? Right? The word bird song is a concept. When I say the words bird song, that's a much different experience than actually hearing the texture of a bird song. Right? Likewise, when I look at a sunset, I often would say to myself, oh, beautiful sunset, naturally, right? And then I go check my phone or talk to a friend or whatever. And so we start to recognize that the word sunset and the actual experience that we're having when we're viewing the sunset are very, very different. So we can start to parse the concept apart from the experience, right? This is an invitation to connect purely with our experience. And the sensed, only the sensed, right? Whether that's a texture of clothing on the skin or a flavor of a drink that we're sipping or some nice food that we're eating, right? And then also with thoughts. Right? In the cognized, only the cognized. Right? Am I, is my mind sort of indulging in wandering and daydreaming? Or am I on topic? Are my thoughts extraneous? Or are they streamlined to give me just the information and the insight that is needed in the present moment? And so when we connect to these sense doors in this way, seeing, hearing, senses, thinking, right? When we really start to pay mindful attention. When I say the words mindful attention, what I'm referring to there is a way of paying attention with non-judgment and care. So when we can bring that caring non-judgment to, let's just use the example of seeing here. We notice that the visual field is changing, right? There's a fan blowing behind me that's making the curtains kind of do this, and the leaves outside on the trees are doing that, right? And I might say the word tree, right? And because the concept is always the same, and I'll use that same concept or that same word every time I look at that tree and every other tree, it feels like the tree is always going to be exactly the same. But when we start to tease the concept apart from the experience, we get a deeper sense of how things are changing. Likewise with sound, and for me, sound is actually quite obvious, right? When we're really listening to the present moment, right? It's like we have this backdrop of silence, and then sound just kind of teems through. The sound of the fan, the sound of my voice, a conversation unfolding. It's just kind of teeming through. It's this, and it never repeats, right? Even though, it can sound very similar. Each moment, it's fresh, it's new. So I want to tell another story from the Buddhist tradition. This comes from the Zen tradition, maybe 600 years after the first stanza that I read from the Buddha. And it's a teaching story more than anything. And it features two characters that are really predominant in the Buddhist tradition, the Zen tradition. The first character, his name is Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma was the monk that is credited with bringing the teachings of the Buddha from India to China, and really planted the seeds for the Zen tradition. He also, incidentally, founded the first Shaolin monastery in Mount Song in China. So we know Bodhidharma existed, there's records around that and so forth. And it also features a younger monk who was a student of Bodhidharma named Wei Ko. And so, Bodhidharma, he lands in China from India. He goes to the emperor's palace first. And he's brought before the emperor. The emperor has heard about Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma was quite a famous figure when he was still in India as a teacher, very, very wise and very clear teacher. And so he has this exchange with the emperor, and it goes in some very strange ways. The emperor and the Bodhidharma ends up leaving the palace in a hurry. I won't go into that part of the story. And he leaves the palace. He goes to Mount Song. He climbs near to the peak of Mount Song and enters into a cave where he meditates, staring at the cave wall for 9 years. And, during this 9-year retreat, let's say, where he's meditating in the cave, lots of people are trying to encourage him to come out and teach and so forth like that. So finally, this younger monk, Wei Ko, approaches the mouth of the cave, and he shouts into the cave. He says, please, Master, my mind cannot find rest. Won't you please help me rest my mind? And this stirred Bodhidharma, and there's another part of the story. It's mythological, very unlikely this actually happened. But anyway, the story is that Wei Ko cut his own arm off to present it to Bodhidharma as a move of, to show his earnestness, right? And so this apparently really stirred Bodhidharma, and he finally, he says, okay, Waco, bring me your mind, and I will show you how to pacify it. So Waco leaves, and he goes to meditate on this for some time, and he comes back to Bodhidharma weeks or months later, and he says, Bodhidharma, I've looked high and low for my mind, in and out for my mind, I can't find it. And Bodhidharma says, there, I've pacified your mind for you. And so it's just that when we look at the activity of our mind, right? In the cognized, there's only the cognized. When we're really observing with that mindful, non-judgmental, caring awareness, we see that the contents of our mind are streaming past. It's this ever-changing field of thoughts and feelings and emotions. And we think that's me, right? Most people anyway tend to sort of identify with being this voice behind the eyes, sort of looking out at the world out there, and the body kind of dangles below us, right? But that is, as some teachers like to say, a colossal mistake of identity, right? That we've identified with being this voice right here. And, in some other texts, it says that that's sort of our last thread of I. That's the last place the I will let go of, is our thoughts, right? But when we start to see the thoughts, right? So typically, we're going all about our day and we're sort of really enmeshed. We think we are that thought, or that stream of thoughts. Right, and so we go about our day, la-di-da-di-da, we're the thinking, and we're almost like a bull that's getting pulled by the nose, right, by our thoughts, right? Pleasant thoughts lead us to good moods, unpleasant thoughts lead us to bad moods, and we're kind of at mercy and whim to all of our urges and addictions. But with mindfulness practice, we get a little bit of separation, right? We say, oh, I'm thinking, and now we're not the thought, we're observing the thought, and we can watch it go. Right? And the metaphor that's often used there is we can observe our thoughts the way we observe clouds passing through the sky. Right? And we literally practice with that imagery so that we come to a place where we recognize that, just because the thought is arising doesn't mean I have to follow it with more thoughts. I don't have to entertain it. I don't need to believe in that thought. I can just let it arise and pass. And what happens there is our thoughts lose their power over us because we start to recognize that, these are just passing experiences, and here is this thing that I feel is I observing those thoughts. Now that's very helpful because that loosens that hold of identification with the thoughts, right? We see they're changing, fluid experiences. We don't need to buy into them. We don't need to identify with them. But then there's one more stronghold for the I, right? And this is leading into no-self here, right? So we turn and we look at this thing we feel is a self, this sort of tension inside the body, maybe around the heart area or in the solar plexus. Some people, again, behind the eyes, right? And when we explore that feeling of I, that too is ever changing, right? How many beliefs do you have now that you didn't have 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 15 years ago? How many times have the beliefs that you now currently hold so tenaciously, how many times have those changed? How many times have what you consider important or not important changed over your lifetime? Right? These concepts, these are the places that we tend to feel our I. Right? Our beliefs, our likes, our dislikes, our values, right? These tend to keep us fixed in this I state. When we let that go, we just see, oh, this is a changing experience. It's not I, right? It's fluid. And so, the way I like to sort of frame the concept of no-self or not-self, different teachers use different no-self, not-self. I use them interchangeably. The way I like to frame that is we do have a self, but it's fluid. It's changing. Right? There is a thing called I, but it's not fixed and permanent. It's just another feature of this ever-changing experience called life. And so I wrote a book on this topic called A Voice from the Ever-Change. And so if you're interested, you might explore that book a little bit. And so we start to feel, with the practices that we'll be exploring in the course, we start to feel this in a very embodied way. How everything is always changing all of the time. And we practice resting in that field of ever-changing experience. And this is where the teachings and practices of impermanence connect to the teachings and practices of not-self. And I just love this. So excuse the grin. We start to feel, again, in the body, this ever-changing experience, right? There's nowhere that we can land on that's not a fluid, changing experience, right? Although our ego would love that if there were, right? And so that's why we tend to cling to our concepts, is because they feel permanent. Again, the words don't change, right? So we cling to our concepts as a way of finding ground and security. But we can find that same security, that same feeling of safety and ground in the midst of change, which is where all the practices really are sort of bringing us to, right? So then what happens is we recognize what gives us this sense of I is agreement with certain things and disagreement with other things, right? We define ourselves according to what we agree with and what we disagree with. And I just find this so interesting, right? So if I like chocolate, right, I become the chocolate lover. I love cats, so I become a cat lover, And I dislike, I don't know, certain political views, right? And so I become that type of person. So it's our response or reaction to what's pleasant in our life, what's unpleasant in our life, and what's neutral in our life that brings us a sense of I. And so if something's coming up in my field of awareness that I'm attracted to and that I want, right, I become the I wanting this thing. And what happens there, this is quite interesting, is because I'm craving that object or desiring that object or longing for it, I fix it into the concept. I want that chocolate bar, right? I'm not seeing it or experiencing it as a fluid changing chocolate bar or a fluid changing desire or a fluid changing I. I'm not having that experience. I've frozen the chocolate bar into being a thing. The desire is a thing, and now I am a thing. And sort of ironically, that feels pleasant, right? It gives us a sense of being somebody, right? Because we're wanting something, right? But that's where suffering comes, because we can't always get what we want, as the Rolling Stones song says, right? And so if we've bought into that, that's where suffering comes. If we bought into me being a fixed thing, the desire being real, the candy bar being a fixed entity, right? This is the birth of suffering. Likewise, if I'm encountering something I dislike, let's say, I don't know, somebody says something offensive to me, right? And now I'm wrestling. I'm going to, teach that person a lesson. I'm going to tell them exactly what I think, blah, 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 blah. I fix the situation into being a thing. I fail to recognize that this is just a situation that's going to pass in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, however long. Right? I fixed it into being an entity. I fixed the anger into being a thing that now I've got to either react to or get rid of. Right? And then I become a permanent I against something out there. Again, that feels somewhat good. There's a sweetness to that because it entrenches me in being a person. It entrenches my personality, my personhood, my ego, my I, which is an illusion. Remember, that's an ever-changing experience, right? So, by recognizing that process, that anger is, installing in me this feeling of being a thing inside this skin, looking out and arguing with the world out there. And simply by recognizing that process, we can start to let that go. And as I said that, I felt my body relax. That's good. Yeah, because it's almost like catch and release with fishing, right? I've caught a reactive emotion. I've caught anger. Okay, and I'm hanging on to the anger, and now I feel like I'm an I, and now I'm suffering with this anger, and I'm going to teach that person a lesson. Release that back into the river. Let that fish go back into the ever-changing field. My body rests. No more suffering. Now, just one more thing on that, and then we'll start to close here. We never want to use any of these practices as a way of condoning transgressions or bad behavior. Right? Now, so if somebody says something mean to me and I feel that anger arise and I recognize I've become an I going to wrestle against the world out there, or that person out there, that's fine to feel that, right? And I can start to let that go and then use the anger to inform me what boundary has been crossed, right? Anger, that's simply information, right? Some need has gone unmet, some boundary has been transgressed. So then I can take the steps forward to remedy that situation without needing the anger. I can let go of the anger. It's not serving me anymore because I've taken on board the information that's there. Right? And then I can use that information to guide my movement forward. Yeah. So I think that's all I'm going to say today. Thank you all for tuning in. It's been a lovely 30 minutes of talking about this. Again, really important topic. At least it's been so helpful in my own life. I hope today's talk was helpful. If you find it interesting and you want to register for the course, once again, suchsweetthunder.org, or you can email me through the website or through my email, chrisluard@yahoo.com, or message me through Facebook or Instagram. And I hope to see you at the course. I'll ring the bell to close us out.